Mr. Witkoff out here today. Obviously, there's a lot of foreign policy news. The president put out a very strong statement to Hamas directly last night, and Mr. Witkoff brought the hostages to the White House, to the Oval Office yesterday. The president met with them, and Mr. Witkoff did as well. So I wanted to give Steve an opportunity to take some of your questions. Obviously, we ask you reserve questions about non-foreign policy topics for him. That's his wheelhouse, and we'll let you guys take some questions, but I think he has some words to share with you as well.
Hi everybody. So we had a wonderful day with the hostages yesterday. We had them for breakfast, spent a bunch of time with them, and then of course they got the treat of a lifetime. They got to spend some time with President Trump. And we thought it was going to be a short period of time because his day was busy, but he ended up spending about an hour with them, with each of the hostages. Pictures, and spent a lot of time listening to their stories about what happened for them in captivity, and he was clearly emotional about it, as anybody would be. We had other people in the Oval Office as well, and I think that they felt a really great sense of catharsis, that they got to tell the president about their experience, talk about other hostages who they spent time with while they were in captivity and the need to get them all home, and that led to his truth last night. So I describe it as a very, very important day for them. I think they all went home feeling that they got a great sense of closure, at least in part. So,
Steve, what is the deadline for Hamas to release all the hostages or else? And secondly, I want to ask you about your trip on Tuesday to Yemen.
So I would say to you that the president was pretty blunt. It's time for Hamas to start acting in a responsible and reasonable way. And we don't think that they have been doing that.
Mr. Witkoff, can we ask about the negotiations with Hamas?
With Rubio and Walz, what do you expect to come out of that meeting? What would a successful meeting look like?
Well, President Zelensky sent a letter to the president. I think the president thought that it was a really good, positive first step. And from that, we're now in discussions to coordinate a meeting with the Ukrainians in Riyadh or even potentially Jeddah. So the city's moving around a little bit, but it will be Saudi Arabia. And I think the idea is to get down a framework for a peace agreement and an initial ceasefire as well.
Steve Holland.
Okay.
Direct discussions with Hamas.
هنا إن شاء الله مقصد ضياء لصفة يشيرون حماس.
How are you going about getting Eden Alexander out of custody?
Well, Eden Alexander is very important to us, as all the hostages are, but Eden Alexander is an American, and he's injured. And so he's a top priority for us. And Adam Bowler is, as you know, the special envoy in charge of hostages, and he's had conversations. We feel that Hamas has not been forthright with us, and it's time for them to be forthright with us. And Eden Alexander would be a very important show. And so we'll see how they're going to react. The president has issued a statement about what's acceptable to him and what's not. And hopefully we'll see some good conduct next week, and I'll be able to go in there and have discussions.
So are you still hoping for a phase 2? Is the three-phase kind of agreement framework still in place, or did the president's social kind of up in that?
Well, I would say that the president basically was saying, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think it's fairly clear he was saying, I've had enough. Like, there's a lot of mistreatment. There's a lot of conversation among these hostages about the deprivation that they went through, about murders that they saw. And I think that the president listened to it, absorbed it, and said, it's unacceptable. I'm not going to tolerate this type of behavior.
So what does that mean for phase 2 negotiations?
I don't think I don't think, as the president has said before, I don't think you alert everybody how you're going to negotiate or what your reaction's going to be.
Steve.
But I wouldn't test President Trump.
Steve, what is the bottom line? What happens when, and what's the bottom line for President Trump, and what happens? Does the U.S. authorize someone to take action, or does the U.S. take action?
Well, I think it's unclear exactly what's going to happen. I think there's going to be some action taken. It could be jointly with the Israelis. It's unclear right now, but I think Hamas has an opportunity to act reasonably. to do what's right and then to walk out. They're not going to be a part of a government there. Everybody understands that, and that is implicit in the May 27th protocol agreement pursuant to which these negotiations are happening. So I think they have to understand that, and if they understand that, then they get a path to leave.
Including military action?
I don't.
A lot of hostages' families in Israel are concerned that if the focus changes to only American hostages, that will leave Israeli hostages, non-Americans behind. What can you say to them? And also, regarding the negotiations, would going back to military options in Gaza, is that something that is on the table, even though it can put hostages at risk?
So I would say to you, Yuna, that yesterday there were 2 American hostages in the room and there were 7 other Israelis. So lives matter to the Trump administration. All lives matter to him. And he was focused on all lives. So
When is this being
Just a question. The negotiations with Hamas, exactly how long have they been going? Have you spoken with Hamas about anything other than possibly the destruction of Gaza? And finally, with Ukraine, is the president satisfied with the outreach that he's gained from President Zelensky?
So I have not met with Hamas, but my understanding is that any discussions with Hamas have been recent. Not 3 weeks has been reported, but a couple of days, and that's well within the ambit of the special envoy. In fact, that's his job. His job is to get these people home. We help in that effort, so I commend him for doing that. Adam cares about lives, as everybody should be, and the hostage families are, I think, grateful for it, and so is President Trump.
You said there was a framework on Tuesday for Ukraine. Will the minerals deal be signed then on Tuesday?
Well, I think Zelensky has offered to sign it, and we'll see if he follows through.
Steve, can I follow up?
Mr. Witkoff, can I ask about, yesterday the hostages came and they met President Trump. President Trump yesterday posted writing Shalom Hamas, hello and goodbye. And what does it mean exactly? And can you tell us, how did he feel yesterday with the hostages at the Oval Office? It was such an amazing meeting. He heard their stories. You really asked them to tell their stories. And can you tell us if you think that you'd like to go through with the second phase of the deal?
I think he felt the awesome responsibility of this office. And I think he listened to 9 human beings who had been held in captivity in some really difficult circumstances say to him, thank God for you. Thank God for your election. Thank God, because each and every one of them, to a person, not scripted, said, but for him, they would not be there today. And they were grateful for their families. And you know, in the Jewish religion, save a life, you save 1,000 lives. The president was there listening to 9 people say that each of them view their lives as being saved by him. They talked about how they heard about his election, and they were uplifted. They were in these dark, dank caverns, 200 feet below the surface of the earth, never having any hope. And when they heard he was elected, they were ebullient. They had never felt like they were elated, waiting for him, because they knew he was going to help them get rescued. So it was a really emotional experience for him, and for me and everybody who was in that Oval Office yesterday. Caroline was there too, and you can ask her. It was deeply moving yesterday.
Will there be a phase 2? Will there be a phase 2?
What about the phase 2 of the deal?
Well, I think that's the discussion. The discussion today, whether look, people define it as an extension of phase 1 or phase 2. For me, I don't really care what we call it. What we call it is, are we going to have a resolution? Are we going to have a peace deal? Are we going to get all of those hostages home, which is the aim of the Trump administration? And that's going to require some good, reasonable, humanitarian action on the part of Hamas. And it's time for them, I think, to gain some political capital and show that they're capable of doing that.
Will Israel have to end the war? Will Israel have to withdraw?
Is there a deadline for the talks? Is there a date with which you say, if we don't make any progress after that date, then we go back fighting?
I think there definitely is such a date, but I'm not at liberty to discuss what that date is.
Steve, what do you mean by joint Israeli actions? Can you describe
Well,
that?
we're a guarantor of the process, right? It's the Israelis who who control Gaza today, and it's the Israelis, and the counterparty is Hamas. And so I think any action really principally comes from the Israelis. But you heard the president say yesterday he's giving the Israelis anything they need. So it's the Israelis, but with very, very strong physical and emotional support from the United States of America.
Steve, can I ask?
I don't mean to.
ask you about the meeting with the Ukrainians next week. Is there anything specific they can bring to the table there that would allow a resumption of the military aid and the sharing of intelligence?
Well, I think those are all decisions of the president, but I think he felt that Zelensky's letter was a very positive first step. There was an apology. There was an acknowledgement that the United States has done so much for the country of Ukraine, and a sense of gratitude. I think that's the biggest deal, right? Like, we've supported that country, and I think it's important when you support somebody that that person comes back and acknowledges that and says, you know, how is it that we should be? It's not just some sort of unilateral way of processing these things.
So it's possible that could all be resumed after the meeting?
Well, I think we're going there to meet, presumably. I think it'll be a good meeting. I really do believe that. Hopefully that'll be a good signal to the Russians, because they have been proactive too in wanting to get something done here. And I think that's what the president, that's who he is. He's a peace through strength president. The best wars are the wars that never have to get fought. And so if we can solve this and not fight anymore and save lives, that's the aim of President Trump.
One more, Jackie. Last question. Go ahead.
Does the U.S. approve of U.S. allies continuing to share U.S. intelligence with Ukraine?
Well, I read this morning that that there might be a suspension of it. So I'm really not sure about that. I'm not sure where we are with John Radcliffe and the DNI, but I would think at some point, hopefully we get things back on track with the Ukrainians and everything resumes. That's what I would hope for.
The United States now negotiate with any group that takes American hostages?
So we heard from the ministry and Russia, and they are waiting for the U.S. team to be named. Do we have a timeline and when that could happen, and who will be involved in that process?
We've been in discussions with the National Security Advisor this morning about who that named team will be. We've reached out to the Russians. We'll let the Ukrainians know as well, and so before we get there, that'll all be a part of it.
Sir, will the U.S. now engage with any terrorist group that takes American hostages?
Well, I think if you're asking about the reach out that you read about, I think it was the responsibility of the special envoy to actually have conversation and see if anything can be achieved. Unfortunately, what we learned is that Hamas told us they were going to be thinking about it a certain way, and they weren't. So I think that's important information for us to have, and so came the tweet from the president, which is, your behavior is unacceptable. You need to clean up your behavior, and that's where we stand as a government.
Is there no concern that the direct engagement could encourage other?
I don't know whether it was a direct engagement or not. It could have been through a go-between. I just know that the messaging was, we want to see these hostages come home. We're not going to sit here, do nothing, and tolerate these kind of inhumane conditions. They've lived in a terrible situation. By the way, who keeps dead bodies? Who does that? Who keeps people chained up downstairs? Who murders in front of other hostages? What's happened here is intolerable, and it's not going to be tolerated by President Trump.
Steve, for your last answer, are you saying that what's been paused is just U.S. intelligence direct to Ukraine, or that there was also a pause on the allies sharing intelligence?
I was simply saying, Jackie, that I can't comment on specifically what was paused.
Does the president see any difference?
President Emmanuel Macron has floated a 1-month pause on long-range strikes in Ukraine and Russia. Do you think this is something that Russia would accept?
We're talking to the French. I can't tell you what specific proposals have been put on the table.
Will President Zelensky be allowed back, or be invited back to the White House?
I think that the president has said that there's a path back, and President Zelensky has demonstrated that he's intent on that good faith path back. He's apologized. He said he's grateful. He said that he wants to work towards peace. By the way, that's ultimately the goal here. President Trump is an outcome-oriented man. He wants a good outcome, and a good outcome is peace, no more death, and a better world.
Does the president see any difference between the
ceasefire and hostage deal that the previous administration put together in terms of the framework? You said it wasn't such a wonderful deal. Can you just confirm, without going into those details, that you're still working off of that framework, or are you negotiating that as well?
Well, the May 27th protocol is the framework. That's what that whole deal was predicated based on that May 27th framework. And what I said was that deal presumed that it would take 5 years to reconstruct Gaza. And so the Saudis, when they talked about normalization, were working on a 5-year program. Gazans, thinking about coming back, thought that they would go back to their homes in 5 years. And I simply am saying that that's a delusion, and that we need to level set the facts so that people can make proper decisions based on the realities. Now you saw a Wall Street Journal article about 10 days ago that said it's 15 to 20 years. So they're finally beginning to agree that people don't belong back there. It's a really dangerous environment for children, for anybody. Unexploded munitions, all kinds of latent ways to get hurt there. So we're level setting the facts. We understand what the conditions are, and we're going to make proper decisions, master planning, so forth and so on, for every stakeholder's benefit, with a lot of input based on the realities.
Does the president see any difference between, or different priorities between returning the American hostages and the others from Gaza?
I think the president cares about all lives. That's what he cares about.
So he wants to let them out together, all of them?
I mean, of course, an American is going to be a priority for him. And by the way, in Edon Alexander's case, this young man was injured. And that's part of it too, part of the calculus. We know, okay, that he's living in extreme circumstances. And so, but I think the president cares equally about Israelis as he would about a Russian captive, as he would about somebody from the Philippines. We've gotten releases across the board because the president cares about saving lives. He's just a good human being who and he knows he has the power to generate this type of thing.
Is there any discussion, Steve, about making defensive weapons available to Ukraine? The civilian populations in Ukraine left vulnerable because of missile strikes by Russia, by drone strikes into Russia. Is that a concern to the president?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
The question simply is about making defensive weapons available to Ukraine. I realize there's a pause right now, but defensive weapons can protect civilian populations.
Well, we've been giving them plenty, but I think the larger discussion for us is to get a peace deal done. We want to see peace. We want to see peace in the Middle East. Well, I should say the president wants to see peace, and we follow our commander-in-chief. We want to see peace in the Middle East. We want to see it in Ukraine. We want to see it all over the world. And we think all of these conflicts can be settled, and we're proving it every single day.
Mr. Witkoff, do we assume that you are talking also with the Iranians to bring U.S. detainees there?
I'm not talking to the Iranians directly, and I have no knowledge of anyone in the U.S. government talking to them right now.
When you're coming to Saudi Arabia, will you visit Israel or other countries in the region also to talk about the ceasefire and release of hostages?
I always like visiting Israel, Yuna.
But are you planning? Is there something planned to come?
I think we're in conversations with the Israelis every single day. They're our strategic partner. We view them as critical to the process. We think that Prime Minister Netanyahu has done an exceptional job. I work directly with Ron Dermer every single day, talk to him multiple times a day. And as needed, we're going to travel to Israel. I basically commute to the Middle East. That's my job for the president. So
will you visit after Saudi Arabia and Israel, or before?
I think I'm going to be in 4 countries next week, and we have to determine the sequencing of it.
Steve, can you just be real clear? Can you just be real clear about, you talked about the U.S.-Israel potential partnership if this doesn't work out with Hamas. Does that mean military action?
I can't say. And I think it would be not tactical to discuss what that game plan is.
Hamas about Edon Alexander, the American hostage. What do you from Hamas about Edon Alexander, the American hostage? We know about Edon Alexander, the American hostage. We know it's important for President Trump and for you.
Well, I think we want Idan back, but we want Niria, we want everybody back. We want them all back. I mean, we estimate 22, maybe 24 live bodies, and we want them all back. And we want the bodies back, too. These parents who know that their children are gone or their relatives are gone, they need those bodies back. They need closure. They need to go and bury their children properly. And so we want the dead bodies back, and we want the live bodies back.
Is it your impression that the Netanyahu government is willing to
release all the hostages eventually?
I'm sorry?
Do you think that you can convince Israel and Hamas, of course, to release the hostages to do the deal?
Well, I think Israel feels as we do. Israel feels that they want to save lives. They do. And hopefully that's possible through dialogue. And that's the point. We're prepared to have dialogue. But if the dialogue doesn't work, then the alternative is not such a good alternative for Hamas.
There's another area of concern in Lebanon.
What's your comment on the Egyptian proposal to Gaza, the counteroffer to the president's plan on Gaza?
I just finished reading it. There's a lot of compelling features to it. We need more discussion about it, but it's a good faith first step from the Egyptians. And I think the larger point is that President Trump is now encouraging what he's talking about in Gaza, is now encouraging other people in the Middle Eastern world to present proactive proposals for what we might consider. And that's what we're doing. We're considering those.
Allowing Palestinians to remain in Gaza, is the president okay with that?
We're evaluating everything there, so it's a little bit early to comment. We've just gotten the proposal.
Does the president understand peacekeeping troops? What is the White House response to that?
I'm sorry?
Russia says they would never accept peacekeeping troops, including European peacekeeping troops.
Well, I never heard that. I heard NATO, and that's a discussion. But I think, again, I don't want to comment on the specifics there. I think we're making, we've got a lot of good buy-in from the Russians and a lot of good buy-in now from the Ukrainians. And that's the really most important thing, right? To bring two sides together, to constantly narrow the gap. This is President Trump's negotiating strategy. Let's narrow the gaps, and then let's figure out how to finally finish it and bring the president in.
Does the president understand the concerns of European leaders about their security, given his push to close those gaps as quickly as he's doing them?
Of course he does. He had meetings with Macron in the Oval Office, with Stammer. So he's listening intently. They're stakeholders here. It's important to them, and it's important to him how they feel. So he's listening intently. But first and foremost, we had to get to the Ukrainians, get them back, right? Get them back in a different place, and they're talking peace now. And the Russians too.
Thank you. Mr. Witkoff has been very generous with his time today. I know everybody's very interested. We have to go inside.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Russia mediating with Iran?